Hello, and welcome to the course of U.S. history. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson. The last time we were together, we were at the brink of war. The British had attempted to seize the Minuteman's weapons, and the Battle of Concord went really bad for them. Today, we're going to see the colonies finally declaring their independence. It begins with the Second Continental Congress, the second meeting of that Congress. And it met in spring of 1775. Now, they had sent off that olive branch petition, that proposal for peace, but in the meantime, they were preparing for war. If they didn't get peace, they knew that the response would be a big British army coming onto their shores. So they needed to make sure they were prepared for war. So they grab George Washington. You may remember George Washington for his losing the battle at Fort Necessity during the French and Indian War. The colonies bring him back and they say, you lost a battle the only time you were placed in charge of an army, but you're still the most experienced military man that we got. So will you command our army, please? And Georgie Boy says, absolutely. Yes, I will. They wait for this olive branch petition, hoping that will come back and that they won't have to use that Continental Army. But that's not going to go well for them. In the meantime, they still have a war to fight, right? They're still fighting against the British. They still need to show that the colonies can stand up for themselves. And they next have that conflict at a place called Bunker Hill. After the Battle of Concord, the British had run back to Boston. But if they wanted to get back at the colonies, if they wanted to go out and attack the men who had defeated them at Concord, well, they would have to march by land. And to do so, the most likely route would pass by a place called Bunker Hill. So the Minutemen fortify that hill, and they prepare for a British attack. The British do attack, and the colonists, although low on weapons, low on supplies, not a whole lot of ammo, do fight off this attacking British army. There's a famous order given not to fire until you could see the whites of their eyes, and the colonists' aim that day was very solid. The British suffered a lot of casualties, about 1,000 in total, and they retreat back to Boston. Now, the Minutemen themselves are a little bit too weak at this point to actually try to take the city of Boston, however. And they do realize that if they want to retake Boston, if they want to get the British out of that city, they're going to need cannons, which is something that they just don't have. Well, lucky for them, they get cannons. Benedict Arnold joins up with a man by the name of Ethan Allen, and together they surprise and defeat a British garrison at Fort Ticonderoga in northern New York. It was a fairly insignificant fort. It had been important in the French and Indian War, but not so much during this fight. The British had not expected to be attacked there, and they were. And Benedict Arnold is able to seize over 50 cannons that they had at this fort. Now, it's quite a distance to Boston from Fort Ticonderoga, but he puts a man by the name of Henry Knox in charge of bringing those cannons down to Boston. And soon enough, Arnold is able to join with Washington. He's got the cannons down near Boston, and Washington is able to place those cannon on the Dorchester Heights pointing at the city. This is a superior elevated position. Boston is not very defensible if you have cannons pointed at it, and the British realize pretty much right away that they are going to lose their army if it comes to a fight. But that fight would also destroy Boston, right? The British would set fire to the city as they retreated. They would destroy the city, and Washington comes to an agreement with Gage, and the British are allowed to leave the city freely. Washington wouldn't attack them as they leave, so the British would get to keep their army, and Washington and the Americans would get to keep Boston. The British would not destroy it. That was the agreement they made. They both kept that agreement, Britain still had their army, and the colonists, soon to be the Americans, got to keep Boston. Well, by the time this happens, King George has received that olive branch petition, and he is having none of it. He does not want peace with the colonists. He wants to show them that they cannot dictate terms to Great Britain, that he is in charge of them, not the other way around, and it will be war. The American colonists, from the English perspective, are declared traitors and rebels, and the response to the Olive Branch petition tells them that if they persist in their rebellion, when captured, they will all be hanged. The Continental Congress gets this message, and Ben Franklin kind of gives a famous response to it, that surely now they must all hang together or they will hang separately, meaning we need to stick together and we need to fight this war, because if we show division now, we're all dead. Now, the idea of independence, of course, is forefront on their minds, but it's not necessarily a popular view throughout the American colonies, until a man by the name of Thomas Paine writes a pamphlet, a little short book called Common Sense, and it argues very strongly and very effectively for a Declaration of Independence. This is printed and reprinted throughout the American colonies. Everybody is reading it. Everybody is excited by Thomas Paine's ideas, and the movement for independence gains momentum. The delegates at that Second Continental Congress, led by the Virginia delegation, with a lot of support from Massachusetts, goes ahead and makes that motion. They propose a Declaration of Independence. Now, the supporters of this, they take a break from that Congress, and everybody tries to feel out their states and see how their states want them to vote. And while everybody is going back home to find out what's going to happen, a group of men stay behind. This group includes John Adams, a future president of the United States, and a big mover in the movement for the Declaration of Independence. Benjamin Franklin, of course, because what important American event at this time doesn't include Benjamin Franklin? And Thomas Jefferson, who up to this point wasn't all that important in American history, but will be very important moving forward. They stay behind. There's a couple of others too, but don't worry about them. They stay behind and they draft a Declaration of Independence. On July 4th, Thomas Jefferson, who is the lead author of the Declaration, presents his document to Congress, and it is approved. John Hancock, who is the president of the Second Continental Congress, is the first to sign it. He writes a nice big signature at the bottom of it. It's kind of famous for his big signature now. And the American colonies become the American states. Next time, we're going to see how these colonies/states do in the war. Particularly looking at that Continental Army led by George Washington, and how it is not doing all that well. But the French eventually join into this war, and that's going to turn the tide. But that all comes next time. Thank you for joining me today for the course of U.S. history, and farewell.